Start in a tick. Yeah, so let's get started. Badram Karnebihi Shunyama Devaha Badram Pashyema Akshabihi Ryajatraha Stirayirangair Tushtuamsastanubihi Veshema Devahitai Yadayuhu Swastiraha Indro Vridrashravaha Swastinaha Pusha Vishwavedaha Swastinaha Tarksho Arishtanemihi Swastino Bruhaspatir Tadatu Yo antah pravishya mama vacha imam prashuptam sanjeevayati akila shakti daraswadamna anyamshta hastacharana shravanatvagadin pranan namo bhagavate purushaya tubhyam lasatu shrimad ananda tirtendurno hridambare yadvajas chandrika swanta santapam vinikrintati padavakya pramana jnan pranamya shirasa gurun vyakarishye yatabhotam vishnu tattva vinirnayam Devam Narayanam Natva Sarvadosha Vivarjitam Paripurnam Gurumshtan Gitartam Vakshami Leshataha. So good evening everyone. Today is a very auspicious day. So happy Dashara, happy Vijayadashami, happy Navratri, and happy Madhvacharya Jayanti. So lots of auspicious days happening on one particular day on a Sunday. So great day to start our Purushottama Yoga, or chapter 15 of Bhagavad Gita. But before we go to the to that particular part of the program today, we have two excellent speakers giving us an overview of Vijayadashami and what is the significance, and also what is the significance of Madhvacharya Jayanti and what is the contribution of Madhvacharya to Hindu/Indian philosophy. So we got two excellent speakers, Ajit ji and Suresh Kankanwadi. So I'm going to invite Ajit to give us an overview of Vijayadashami so that we can remind ourselves why we celebrate this as an auspicious day. So Ajit, your slides coming up next.
Thanks, Madhu. And I take this opportunity to wish everybody a happy Dashera. And are the slides coming up?
Yeah.
Sorry, I can't see the slides.
Oh, I can. I'm sharing the screen. Can you not see? Can somebody feedback to me, please? Can all others see the slides?
No, we can just see the Zoom join a meeting
Fine.
screen.
Can you not see my slides?
No.
Okay, 1 minute. I'll come back again.
The slides.
ഒരാളുടെ സ്ലൈഡ് എങ്ങനെ ഇതിലുണ്ട്
എൻ്റെ ഫോണിൽ എടുത്തായിരുന്നു പുറത്ത്
Madhu, you okay? What are you waiting for?
To share the screen and see the slides, Sudarshan.
Okay.
So, okay now?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay, yeah. So just to restart again, so Ajit ji is going to give us a summary of why we celebrate Vijayadashami and what is the significance of that. So Ajit, please carry on.
Yeah, thanks, Madhu. Yeah. So Vijayadashami, it is celebrated on the 10th day of Ashwin, which is the lunar solar calendar of the Hindus, and it is starts from the month of Ashwin, starts from the first new moon after the autumn equinox, and it's on the 10th day of the Ashwin month that we celebrate the Vijayadashami. So it's in the Shukla Paksham, that is the waxing phase of the moon, that is the moon from the new moon to the full moon period. And it is thought to be a very auspicious time when when there is an increase in spiritual, you could increase in the spiritual knowledge, and there is gains in all forms of material as well as your spiritual activities. So as the word suggests, Vijayadashami, it's the victory on the 10th day. And this is thought to reflect the victory of good over evil. And the victory of good, which is Mother Durga or Dharma, over the Asura Mahishasura, who represents the Adharma. The next slide, please. Thanks. So just a little bit of a background about Mahishasura. So he was a demon who wanted to rule all the three worlds. That's the Bhuloka, the Swargaloka, and the Pitraloka. And he was fighting with the Devas, and he would never be able to defeat the Devas. So he then decided to do a lot of austerity and tapas to try and get the boon from Brahma, and he prayed to Brahma. And after a long time, Brahma appeared in front of him, and Mahishasur wanted a boon to be immortal. So Brahma felt that that is something that he was not able to give him, because Brahma himself is not immortal. So he couldn't give him anything that he is not capable of having or doing. So Mahishasura wanted a boon to say that no man, no animal, no god or deva could kill him. And Brahma gave him that boon. So because of which Mahishasura became quite complacent, and he felt that nobody can defeat him. And the gods got quite worried and concerned about his growth. So they went to Lord Vishnu to find a way out of this problem. And Lord Vishnu directed them to Lord Shiva. And Lord Shiva then got all the devas together, and using their combined strength, he created Goddess Durga with her 10 arms and with all the strengths of these goddesses. Next slide, please. And during these Navratri period, the 9 days, the Goddess Durga had a fight with Mahishasura. And after 9 long days of battle, he was killed on the 10th day of Vijayadashami. And it's also on this day, during the Ramayana, that Sri Rama also defeated Ravana. And that's the sort of another importance of this day. And there is another viewpoint that the Dashera means it's the 10 defeat of the 10 heads, which could also mean the different sort of attributes that one has within oneself that one should get rid of, like the ego and other pettiness that one has within oneself. So the kama, lobha, moha, krodha, and all those negative qualities that we should try and get rid of that, and we should try and overcome those. And it is also like a victory if you go on to a spiritual journey during these 9 days and maintaining the fasting and cleanliness. We try and get rid of, purge your minds of all these evils. In southern India, this day is also celebrated as Vidyarambha, where all the kids are taught how to write, and this is the initiation into learning. So usually it's the elder person in the family who would hold the child's hand and get him to write the different alphabets of the language in either rice or in sand. And this is also thought to be part of one of the Hindu traditions, which shows the importance of education. And this is the parent taking the responsibility that they will be initiating their kids into education to try and make sure that they learn and follow the rules of the dharma. So next slide, please, Madhu. Thanks. And what we normally get the kids to write is Hari Shri Ganapade Namaha, which is a sort of an obeisance to Lord Ganapati. And this is not just the reading and writing. People tend to offer the puja to all their equipments. So it's more also like an Ayudha puja. So people who use certain things for their work. So some people, for example, drivers, I understand, they offer the key to their vehicle for the puja, and they offer puja to, they take the blessings of the god to make sure that they do things properly in their chosen field of career. And it is quite apt that today we are here together, and with Madhu leading us on this journey of us seeking and trying to get to a bit of understanding of the knowledge of the different scriptures. So thank you very much, Madhu. It's over to you.
So Ajit, thank you very much. That was a very comprehensive review. So to this, if I may add, because we are doing Mahabharata, we are doing Bhagavad Gita this session, it is also very auspicious because in certain parts of India, Vijayadashami is also celebrated in commemoration of Arjuna actually taking all his weapons out. So as you know, the whole Pandavas, they went on Vanavasa for 12 years. And then the 13th year was Ajñātavasa, where they had to hide. And then at that time, what Arjuna had done was he had actually hidden all his weapons in a burial ground hanging under a banni tree. And today was the day when Arjuna actually removed the weapons from the banni tree, including his Gandiva, to defeat evil. So that is also celebrated as a Vijayadashami in certain parts of India. And it's very apt for today as well. Because Gita, that is the whole purpose of Gita, isn't it? To remove and fight ignorance and take away the ignorance and bring knowledge into our lives. So thank you very much. And as it happens, Vijayadashami is also celebrated in southern parts of India, in fact throughout India and across the globe, as Madhvacharya Jayanti, the appearance day of Madhvacharya. Mohandas Prabhu this morning from Hungary sent me a picture of his Krishna Valley, where they were doing pujas today, and they're doing a lot of celebration of Madhvacharya in their Gurukula, and he had sent me a photo which was very nice to see. So I've invited Suresh Kankanwadi to give us an overview of Madhvacharya and his works, a tour de force, as it were, of the contributions of Madhvacharya and why people in India celebrate. Suresh, the stage is yours.
Thanks, Madhu. I hope you can hear me well.
Yeah, that's fine.
So what I will try to do in the next few minutes is to make an attempt to share some information with regards to what I have been able to understand, learn, or assimilate with regards to Madhvacharya's life and his contribution. I'd like to start with a small prayer. Vyasaya Bhavanashaya Shrishaya Gunarashaye Rudyaya Shuddha Vidyaya Madhvaya Chanamo Namaha. Now, moving on to the thanks, trying to reconstruct history, which is as old as 1,000 years, always poses problems and time distorts. But fortunately for us, in order to try and learn and understand about the life and contributions of Madhvacharya, we have Sumadhva Vijaya as a single source of information compiled by Narayana Panditacharya, who was a contemporary, who actually witnessed, in fact, he was a witness to the great debate of Madhvacharya with his father, Trivikrama Panditacharya. And he also composed a bhashya to it as Bhava Pradipa, in which he clearly claims full authenticity of representation in Sumadhva Vijaya and takes complete responsibility for depicting facts and not distorting any information. That is to say that we have an authentic reference to be able to learn and understand the life of Sri Madhvacharya. The work Sumadhva Vijaya has been studied extensively, and I have just picked a couple of sentences from the work of Professor G.V. Nadagowda in describing Sumadhva Vijaya, in which he says that it is not just any other biography. It's indeed an epic. It's comparable to the Mahakavyas, and it's spread over 16 cantons. It has as many as 1,000 verses. And it depicts a superhuman hero, his colossal movement from his place of birth in Pajaka Kshetra, where he descended to actually provide the right direction and the right interpretation to the understanding of the Vedic context, which was being grossly misunderstood. As we'll see on the next slide, Madhvacharya took birth. He chose the family. On the next slide, Madhu, if you don't mind, please. He chose the pious couple of Narayana Bhatta and Satyavati, living in the city of what was then known as Rajatapithapura or Udupi. The couple actually had done 12 years of severe penance to beget a son who could save them from Naraka. And Vayu actually takes birth in their family. And as a child, Madhvacharya knew his destiny right from his birth, and he gives ample evidence of it. I'll quote a few instances. It would be impossible to go through all the instances, and each one of them, as I learn or read more about it, is simply brilliant and has so much lessons to be learned from. As a 4-year-old, he was taken. Vasudeva was attending a marriage in his mother's place, and while everybody was busy in the event of the marriage, this 4-year-old child simply loiters all by himself, goes goes across the city into 2 temples of Mahalingeshwara and Shankaranarayana, and ends up in the Ananteshwara temple at Udupi. The parents are aghast, everybody is worried, and they ultimately find this 4-year-old child, Vasudeva, and the father asks the child, what happened? Were you not afraid? And this was 1,000 years ago when it was thick forest all around. And the child innocently replies, Dad, why do you think I was alone? God was always with me. He further goes on as an 8-year-old. All of a sudden, one day he starts saluting all inanimate objects, trees, chairs in the house. And on being asked, he says, no, I'm just saluting to my Vastu. And what he perhaps meant by Vastu was too difficult for people around him to understand. And the general interpretation was that, hey, here is a materialistic child. We can get him married and he'll become a grihastha. But the very next day, he disappears from his house and then goes back to the Ananteshwara temple in Udupi. Father comes, tries to cajole him to get him back, but he is a dhira sannyasi. He's made up his mind. This 8-year-old child wants to become a sannyasi. There's stories around it. He convinces his parents. He fulfills the parents' wishes. And Achyuta Prajna actually ordains him to a sannyasi and gives him the name of Purna Prajna. Because by then, perhaps Achyuta Prajna was well aware that his Shishya was the one who was going to teach him, not he teaching his Shishya. And he gives him the name Purna Prajna. Purna Prajna begins his lessons, and on his very first lesson, which was of the prevailing popular text then of Ishta Siddhi, he objects to it. He doesn't want to recite the first verse of Ishta Siddhi. The Guru, a young child, 9-10 years old, is refusing to obey the command of the Guru. And the Guru gets irritated and asks him, why? Why on earth would you not recite it? Madhvacharya says, no, it's full of mistakes. The Guru challenges him. What do you mean mistakes? Can you tell me what those mistakes are? And in a split of a second, Madhvacharya recites 32 mistakes from the very first verse of the Ishta Siddhi. So his innate brilliance was there. It was there for people to see. And very soon, Achyuta Prajna understands and makes him in charge of the Matha, and Purna Prajna becomes Ananda Tirtha. And unlike for us mortals, the names that were given to Madhvacharya were actually descriptions of his qualities, as we saw in Purna Prajna or in Ananda Tirtha. Throughout his life, there was not a single instance wherein he suffered, wherein he had difficulties, no matter what was there, be it chased by dacoits in the jungles of North India, be it crossing Ganga on with no assistance, he was full of ananda at every single step of his life. Just one or two other instances, just to quote, Madhuji had asked us, how many meanings does Vishnu Sahasranama have? This was something which I related to when Madhvacharya was touring South India and gave a slightly different interpretation of the Vedas. And when challenged, he said Vedas had at least 3 meanings and Vishnu Sahasranama had at least 100 different meanings. It was, of course, an assembly of scholars, and they challenged him to tell the 100 meanings of Vishnu Sahasranama. Madhvacharya throws the challenge back. He tells them, I will tell you the 100 meanings of Vishnu Sahasranama. Should you be able to capture each one of them as I keep reciting? The audience thinks it's a simple task. There are so many of us. What's the difficulty? And they say yes. And Madhvacharya starts giving the meanings. Hardly had he reached the 50th meaning, the audience gives up and says, Acharya, we cannot keep up with you. Please excuse us. Many such instances take place. He writes his Gita Bhashya, goes to Badri, and meets Vyasa. And Vyasa asks him to write a Bhashya to Mahabharata. He comes back. He wins glorious debates with Shobhana Bhatta. I mean, some of his disciples like Padmanabha Tirtha, Narahari Tirtha, Trivikrama Pandita Acharya are examples to his sheer brilliance and his ability to convince people who did not agree with him. He goes to Kurukshetra, discovers weapons in Kurukshetra, so on and so forth. And then in the middle, he takes the pen name of Madhva. This also perhaps relates to the fact that he was the one who gave the right interpretation for Madhu Vidya in Chandogya Upanishad. And then thereafter, he's referred to as Acharya Madhva. It's important to note that after Krishna, he perhaps is the only second incarnate to have disclosed his incarnation, that he was the incarnation of Vayu himself. As we move to the next slide, every single instance where Acharya spoke was simply brilliant. There was no question that was unanswered. And answers used to come within minutes for days for which people took to formulate problems. There was no subject that was untouched. Just to understand the extensive nature of Acharya's work, if we look at the Itihasas and the Purana and the Vedas are infinite, even if we leave out the Vedas, just the Itihasa and Puranas together, around 4 lakh verses in the Puranas and the Upapuranas, Shatakoti verses in Pancharatras, and for someone to read, understand, contextualize, and conclude across this vast literature certainly cannot be a human effort. And there was no subject that was unknown or untouched to him. He was a master in architecture. He was a master in music. He was a master in mathematics. He could contemplate a kshana, which is 1 upon 16,000th part of a second. He had knowledge of the invisible spectrum. He composed 37 granthas, and if we include the Shrotras and Shrutis, totally 40 of them, which are known as the Sarvamoola Grantha. To such an Acharya who gave us this Tattvavada, and if we were to contemplate and ask, Madhu, if we move to the next slide, as to what his contribution was, and should the conclusion be that, and be limited to the fact that he differed with Shankara's thought, it would be very unfortunate, for what Madhva taught us was much more comprehensive and universal. He basically taught us reality, that what we see, perceive, hear is real. And having chosen this path, it was but an anticipated side effect that he had to disagree with Shankara's thought, but by no means. Talking of reality, Madhva goes on to say, he proclaims Vishnu Sarvottama. It doesn't matter with what name you call him. It doesn't matter with what in what form you worship him or what qualities you attribute to him. Every single word, every single note, every single sound depicts him, and there cannot be any Veda in the understanding of Paramatma. But Veda is there, exists, but that is confined to the dependent reality and not to the independent reality, which is Paramatma himself. He further goes on, gives us a very good, firm basis to understanding Devata Taratamya. He propagates sadhana even in the jivas capable of moksha, and he says their ananda vritti increases. And to such a master who said that jnana alone will never be sufficient, it needs to be accompanied with bhakti. If one were to ask, what should one pray for? What better than the prayer that Trivikrama Panditacharya himself wrote, as we move to the next slide, in Vayustuti in the 14th verse, where he says, Matar me, Matarishwan, Pitaha, Atula Guru, Bhratru, Ishta, Apta Bandho, Swamin, Sarvantaratman, Ajara Jaraita, Janma Mritya Mayanam, Govinde, Dehi Bhaktim, Bhavati cha Bhagavan, Urjitam, Nirnimittam, Nirvyajyam, Nishchalam, Sad Guna Gana, Bruhatim, Shashwatim, Ashu Deva. Basically says, O Vayu, you are the nourishing mother, you are the protecting father, the ultimate guru, brother, dearest, most trusted, closest friend, indweller of all jivas, the one who has conquered age, sleep, death, sickness. To you we pray for bhakti that is pure, unconditional, unwavering, and ever increasing and lasts eternally even during mukti. And this, please grant us to us now. With that, I would like to conclude here, Madhu. Thank you for the opportunity. Sri Krishna Arpanamastu.
Wonderful, Suresh Kankanwadiji. That was quite an inspirational talk for 15-20 minutes. We really thoroughly enjoyed it, giving us a whistle-stop tour of the achievements of Acharya. So I think we should make these kind of occasions to celebrate all the big Acharyas who appeared in India. And we every Jayanti that happens, I think we should have a session like this to celebrate the great philosophers that India has produced. So moving on to the main section of today's talk. So let's start off with Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirayet. So this is the very first verse of Veda Vyasa in Mahabharata. We get into the 15th chapter, the very first verse. I just have one quiz for all of us to think about. Why is this epic known as Mahabharata? So who is going to take that question and answer it, please? Why do we call this as Mahabharata? And does it have another name as well? And it is in the clue in the very first verse. So who is going to answer that? Shall I pick on somebody?
Shall I do it, Madhuji?
Go for it, Shilaji. Yeah, please.
The epic is known as Mahabharata because it is a situation which happened during the war, Kurukshetra war, in the Mahabharata, in the Bhishma Parva. And its real name is Jayam, which is written here in Tato Jayam Udirayet. That shows that it is Jayam. And Narottamam here says that it is Hanuman, I mean Vayudev. I think anyway. That's what I think, or Hanuman we call. So thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Shilaji. That's good. So Mahabharata, as you said, yeah, there is a Kurukshetra battlefield that was a big war, so it was called Mahabharata. But that is the Gita that you are thinking about. But mind you, there are lots of other parvas before Mahabharata also. So one other way of looking at Mahabharata is, and as we have discussed before, everything in Vedic Sanskrit, everything that Veda Vyasa writes is etymological. Yeah. So when you look at Mahabharata, so the etymology of Mahabharata is Mahatvat Bharavatvacha Mahabharatam Utyate. So Mahatvat Bharatvat. So what that means is this particular text is so full of philosophical thoughts and philosophical ideas that it is heavy because it is full of philosophy. There is a Purana, there is a history behind why it is called Mahatvat Bharavatvacha Mahabharatam Uchyate. But you can read that. But I just thought I'll pick on that also. Besides the fact that there's a big battle that happened, that's why it's called Mahabharata. But etymologically, because it is Bhara means heavy. Heavy of with what? It's heavy with philosophy, philosophical ideas, and that is why it is called Mahabharata. And as Shilaji rightly pointed out, it is also called Jayam. It is also called Jayam. And why is it called Jayam? Shilaji, what is your view on why it's called Jayam? Or anybody else want to contribute there?
I feel because, like you said, it is Mahatvat, all the etymology. I mean, I don't know, get the English words, but whatever you need in this Mahabharata, in the 1 lakh shlokas which is given to human beings, it's all there. All, I mean, Brahmanda, I mean, Rahasya, so many Rahasyas there. Once you get to know them, it will be, we have to go towards the success, I feel. I don't know. I don't know the.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, success is assured. Yeah, so success of moksha is assured.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
very, very nicely put. I really appreciate it. So the Jayam. So here is another way of looking at why Mahabharata is also called Jayam. Okay, so look at the Sanskrit alphabets. I've put in on the left all the alphabets. Jaya, Ja, Jakara, Yakara. And then Ya is the first. So when you read, it's called Ankanam Vamuto Gatihi. So you read in reverse. So it becomes 18. So the word Jaya, when Veda Vyasa puts the word Jaya, as Shilaji mentioned, it talks about victory. Victory for what? Victory in the samsara, that you make progress. But how do you approach, how do you make that victory? It is through number 18. It is towards the number 18. And that number 18 is what Jaya is all about. So if you look at the Sanskrit alphabet, it fits in very beautifully 18. So last week, when we had our inaugural lecture, Professor Mukund spoke very eloquently on number 18 and so on. So I wanted to start off there and actually give you a background about this 18, which is Jayam, which is the very first verse in Mahabharata, how it fits and it actually navigates. When you look at Gita and the Bharata, the number 18 navigates in various directions, and ultimately it comes to chapter 15. So that is how I want to take this number 18 today. So we all know about Prashna Upanishad. We have done it empty number of times, and we have discussed how the 16th is the Jiva, and it has 15 coverings. The 15 coverings to the Jiva is given by Chetana Prakriti or Lakshmi, and how the 18th entity, which is Vishnu himself, who is the person who will remove this coverings of the Jiva and give them moksha. So that 18 denotes Vishnu. It denotes the supreme person or the supreme personality, whom we call Purusha or Krishna or Vishnu or Narayana, whatever the name might be. So he is the one that he is going to remove us from samsara. And Vedavyasa very, very eloquently and very intelligently, he's a clever chap, he picks up this word Jayam to give you that indication. See, Jayam, number 18, get some ideas. Who is this 18? Vishnu. Look at this Mahabharata, what I've written. It is not really about me, who is an incarnation of Narayana, but it is about Krishna and the greatness of Krishna and so on. So he is giving this clue for us to move towards number 18 or Vishnu. And again, this is the whole of Mahabharata and all the Vedas and Itihasas and Puranas are full of symbolism, and they are also full of philosophy in numbers. So this philosophy in numbers in 18 is a recurrent theme in Sanatana Dharma. So when you look at Jaya, as I said on the right hand side of the slide, the number 18 is Jaya. Look at the number of parvas in Mahabharata. You have 18 parvas in Mahabharata. Yeah. So now my first question, which parva did the great battle happen? Who is going to answer that question? So the great Mahabharata battle where the Gita happened, in which parva did it happen?
Bhishma Parva?
Okay, anybody else? Did somebody else say something?
It begins in Bhishma Parva.
Okay, thank you. So two consistent answers. Correct. So Bhishma Parva is where the Gita is. Vishnu Sahasranama is in which parva?
Shanti Parva.
Anybody? Anushasana Parva. So it comes in Anushasana Parva. So these two parvas are important because we all recite Vishnu Sahasranama, and of course we are all very familiar with Gita. So you have the Bhishma Parva and Anushasana Parva is where Gita and Vishnu Sahasranama happens. But together there are 18 parvas in this text called Jayam, which denotes the number 18. So if you move on to the next slide, and this is an interesting slide from my perspective, because when I was reading this a couple of years ago, I was really dumbstruck. I was really shocked. My God, this is the level in which Vedavyasa has actually looked at number 18. So I want to tell you something about the significance of 18 in the Kurukshetra battlefield that Shilaji mentioned about Mahabharata. The Kurukshetra battlefield, you have 18. What is the significance of 18 in the Kurukshetra battlefield? Now, let us look at military formation. So you have Vyudam. So Vyudam means military formation. Yeah. So in the first chapter, Vyasa gives actually those clues. You would have read those second verse. Drushtva tu Pandavanikam Vyudam Duryodanastada. Yeah. Vyudam. Vyudam means military formation. Anikam there. That word Anikam, that is, I put a square onto it. That Anikam is a battle formation. Immediately in the third verse, he says, Pashyetam Pandaputranam Acharya Mahatim Chamum. So again, Krishna is actually giving us clues about military formation, and he has picked up two military formations in the Mahabharata battle, Anikam and Chamum. And why did he do that? Vedavyasa doesn't put words just randomly. When he places a particular word in a particular sentence, it has significance. So I just want to give you this interesting fact. So in Kurukshetra, in the Mahabharata battle, the military formations were quite a few. So one was called Patti, Senamukha, Guruma, Ghana, Vahini, Prutanam, Chamum, Anikam, and Akshohini. Yeah. So those were the various battle formations. And what did the military formations have? Each military formation will have elephants, chariot, horse riders, and ground soldiers. So they will be in the ratio of 1:1:3:5. So the minimum formation is called Patti. The Patti formation, military formation, will have one elephant rider with the weapons, one horse rider with the one charioteer with weapons, and a horse rider with weapons, and 5 foot soldiers. So that is the formation 1:3:5. So the military formation would increase. You had to multiply by 3 as it becomes 3, 3, 9, and 15. Guruma 9, 9, 27, 45. And then Ghana 27, 27, 81, 135. Vahini 81, 81, 243, 405. Prutanam 243 elephants, 243 chariots, 729 horse riders, 1,215 foot soldiers. That is Prutanam. Multiplied by 3. Then you have 729, 729, 2187, 3645. Then you go to Anikam. Again, you multiply it by 3. That becomes 2,187, 2,187, 6,561, 10,935. Come to Akshohini. Times 10 of Anikam becomes Akshohini. So it gives you the number of soldiers, horse riders, and everybody there. Now here is the magic of number 18 that appears here. First magic is on the left side. Akshohinis. How many Akshohinis in Kurukshetra battle? 18 Akshohinis. How were the Akshohinis divided between both parties? Who's going to answer that question? How many
11 and 7.
Kauravas get? Thank you very
11
much.
and 7.
Excellent. Correct. Thank you. Yes. So 11 for Kauravas and 7 for our poor Pandavas. The battle happened for how many days? 18 days. Yeah. Now here is the magic of numbers, and as I said, Gita is full of symbolism and numbers. So in the second verse and the third verse of the first chapter, he used anikam and he has used chamum, and we are all familiar with Akshohinis. Look at those numbers. Chamum, 7, 2, and 9. You add 7 plus 2 plus 9. What is the number? You add 2 plus 1 plus 8 plus 7. What is the number? How much does it come to? Look at Akshohini, 21,870 elephants. So 2 plus 1 is 3, plus 8 is 11, plus 7 is 18. Yeah, everywhere it is 18. In Chamum, look at that, 7 plus 2 plus 9 is 18. So everywhere you see 18, even in the Akshohini, as you said, was 18. Battle is 18 days. Gita is 18 chapters. So again, as you see the direction, starting from Jayam in the very first verse, the Veda Vyasa is taking you into those numbers 18. So if you move on to the next slide, look at our Purushottama Yoga, chapter 15. And you're all familiar with Purushottama Yoga, chapter 15, which is the topic for the next 6 to 8 weeks, hopefully. So there are 20 verses. But in the 20 verses, the first 18 verses are the chief verses of Purushottama Yoga. Number 18 again. 19 and 20 are Pala Stotras, they're Pala Slokas. It just gives you what is the benefit of knowing the philosophy behind the first 18 verses. So even in chapter 15, 18 becomes very important. Yeah. So what I wanted to do was just to inspire you about the number 18 and how Veda Vyasa. Okay. Now this chapter 18, all the acharyas, Shankaracharya, Ramanujacharya, and Madhvacharya, all three acharyas have said that chapter 15 is the key chapter of Bhagavad Gita. In fact, all these acharyas would say, if you don't have time to read the whole of Bhagavad Gita, at least read 15th chapter, at least memorize the 15th chapter and know the philosophy of the 15th chapter in detail. Such is the importance that is given by all the three acharyas. In fact, Madhva would also say, if you can't even memorize the 20 verses of chapter 15, at least memorize the last 5 verses. So if you know the philosophy of the last 5 verses of chapter 15, then that means you know the philosophy of chapter 15. If you understand chapter 15, then it means that you understood 18 chapters of Bhagavad Gita. If you have understood 18 chapters of Bhagavad Gita, then it means you have understood Mahabharata. If you have understood Mahabharata, then it means you have understood this. Such is the significance of chapter 15. Acharya, for example, in 17 of his 37 work, he would actually cite these verses in his philosophical discussions. So such is the importance given to chapter 15. So the reason why I'm saying this is, I know many of us know chapter 15 by heart, but every time we read chapter 15, there's always new information and new things that we learn. I would actually request those who have not memorized chapter 15, this is the opportunity over the next 6 to 8 weeks for you to actually make an attempt and an effort to memorize every verse of chapter 15 and hold on to that for the rest of your life, because it will take you places. Yeah. So we can make that exercise over the next 6 to 8 weeks, so that at the end of 8 weeks, all of us who are part of this group actually know the chapter 15 by heart. Okay, so on that note, I want to move to the next slide. So next, the question really here is, why is this called Purushottama Yoga? Why is this chapter 15 called Purushottama Yoga? So you have to split it up. So you have to say Purusha, you have to say Uttama, and you have to say Yoga. Okay, Purusha means what? We spend 8 weeks talking about Purusha Shuktam. And we spent a lot of time talking about Purusha Shuktam, and there we looked at this word Purusha, what it means. What is the etymology of Purusha? Purusha means not a male. God is not a male, God is a male, God is a female, God is both. Yeah, the Ardhanari, that is also is there in God. He's both male, female, and both together. So Purusha does not mean a male. Purusha, the etymology of Purusha is, it's got at least 10 different meanings and more. So I would just pick a few that I've listed here. So one is Purvameva Aham. Purvameva Aham means the one that was there before creation is Purusha. Okay. Then let's pick another one. Puru Saha. Sahapuru. Sahapuru means Paripurna, the one who is infinite and complete. Let's pick a last one. Purna Shad Gunatvad. The one person who has infinite auspicious attributes is called Purusha. So the Purushottama Yoga, Purusha, you need to understand that it is talking about a being who is of infinite auspicious attributes. Look at Narayana Upanishad. The very first verse of Narayana Upanishad says, Om Ata Purushohavai Narayanaha. And it clearly says, this Purusha that comes in Purusha Shukta, this Purusha who is celebrated in the chapter 15 is Narayana himself, is the proclamation by Narayana Upanishad. Okay, so that is Purusha. So we understand he is Narayana, Vishnu, Krishna. Okay, Uttama. What does Uttama mean? Uttama means the highest. Fine. Then you have this word yoga, which has been misinterpreted in many works. Yoga, as such, has got multiple meanings. There are at least 30 different meanings for yoga, more than 30. But in Bhagavad Gita, when every chapter ends with yoga, what that means is upaya. Upaya means the means. The means is, this is the chapter which is the means of knowing this highest person. So that is the literal Purushottama Yoga. That is, this is the chapter and it is the upaya or the means by which you can know about this Purusha. Okay. And if you look at Purusha Shukta itself, in Yajurveda part of Purusha Shukta, which comes in Taittiriya Aranyaka, it's got 18 verses again. So 18 verses of Purusha Shukta, 18 verses of chapter 15, everything tallies, and if you look at it. Yeah. So that is Purushottama Yoga. What is actually the meaning of the chapter? Yoga means upaya, and I can't stress this enough. Yoga means not sitting around in a corner with your back straightened to read the Gita. Yoga means it is an upaya. So when we say Sankhya Yoga, it means the upaya to know Samyak Khyati, which means the chapter which gives you correct knowledge. Yeah. So that is how you understand each chapters. So moving on to the next slide. So why is Purushottama Yoga, this chapter, then becomes so important? It becomes so important because, and we have dealt this over the last 7 months, talking about what are all the three components in all of existence. There are only three components to everything that exists. So you have the Supreme Brahman or Vishnu or God, that is one entity. Then you have infinite souls or sentient beings who are finite but infinite in number. So you have the jivas. Then you have the jada, the matter, this material universe. So these are the three things that exist in all of existence. And not surprisingly, Purushottama Yoga deals with these three primary substances that exist in all of existence, exactly as how discussed in Mundaka Upanishad that you will all know by heart by now. So the first 2.5 verses of chapter 15 talks about Prakriti. It talks about matter. Matter, what is it? What is its ontological position? How is it related to the Supreme? And how do the jivas operate in matter? So that is described in the first 2.5 verses. The next 2.5 verse to 5 verse is for the jivas. And the jivas, where Vyasa will say, this is what you need to do to understand matter and to understand God as an independent being. So there are 2.5 verses, sadhanas for jivas. And the rest of the 15 verses is about the Supreme Vishnu, the Brahman. Talks about his Swarupa from 6 to 11, his Sarva Antaryamitva in verses 12 to 15, Sarva Uttamatva in verses 16 to 18, and 19 and 20, as I said, are Phala Slokas. So this is the overall structure of Purushottama Yoga. And the key take-home message from this slide is Purushottama Yoga is important because it deals with all these three entities. That is all is there in existence. And it is a comprehensive chapter. So if you understand the philosophy of this, that is why Veda Vyasa has said, if you understand the philosophy of this, then it means you understand the philosophy of the Vedas. Okay. So remember the structure. So the next one is we move to today's class and probably for the next few classes. So for the first 2.5 verses, as I said, we are dealing with Prakriti, and from 2.5 to 5, we are dealing with Jivas. So I would be very grateful if Sheilaji could explain the first 5 verses before we go to the very first line. So what I'll do today is, let's see how the time takes us, but I want to at least deal with the first line of the first verse because there is so much information that is packed in the first line, and I hope I'll be able to share my excitement with you about the greatness of this work. So Sheilaji, please, the stage is yours.
Can you hear me, Madhuji?
Yeah, yeah.
अथ पञ्चदशोऽध्यायः पुरुषोत्तमयोगः श्रीभगवानुवाच ऊर्ध्वमूलमधः शाकम् अश्वत्थं प्राहुरव्ययम् छन्दांसि यस्य पर्णानि यस्तं वेद स वेदवित् अधश्चोर्ध्वं प्रस्तुतास्तस्य शाखा गुणप्रवृद्धा विषयप्रवालाः अधश्च मूलान्यनुसन्ततानि कर्मानुबन्धीनि मनुष्यलोके न रूपमस्येह तथोपलभ्यते नान्तो न चादिर्न च सम्प्रतिष्ठा अश्वत्थमेनं सुविरूढमूलम् असङ्गशस्त्रेण दृढेन छित्त्वा ततः पदं तत्परिमार्गितव्यं यस्मिन् गता न निवर्तन्ति भूयः तमेव चाद्यं पुरुषं प्रपद्ये यतः प्रवृत्तिः प्रस्तुता पुराणी निर्मानमोहा जितसङ्गदोषा अध्यात्मनित्या विनिवृत्तकामाः द्वन्द्वैर्विमुक्ता सुखदुःखसंज्ञै गच्छन्त्यमूढा पदमव्ययं तत्.
Thank you very much, Sheilaji. So you need to drink some water. I think your throat is a little sore, I feel. But anyway,
I've
thank
got a
you.
sore throat for past 1 week.
Okay, yeah, please look after yourself. Yeah, so that was excellent. Thank you very much for that. So that is the first 5 verses. So this 5 verses should take about 4 or 5 weeks maybe to deal with all its glory and from all the angles in which these 5 verses come up. So let's memorize this over the next 5 weeks. So moving on to the context, the prakarana as to why the chapter 15, the first 2.5 verses basically start off talking about Prakriti. So one thing I wanted to tell you here is when you read Bhagavad Gita, when you take a particular chapter and read it, please don't read it in isolation because every chapter is related to some other chapter, either the previous chapter or a few chapters behind it. And some of the verses may be related to the verses that have appeared in other chapters. So for example, this particular verse, Urdhvamulam adahashakam ashwattam prahuravyayam chandamsi yasya paranani yastam veda savedavit. So there is the in chapter 13, 6th verse, there is a word ahankaro buddhir avyaktam yevacha indriyani dasha ekam cha panchacha indriya gocharaha. Okay. So there is one particular verse where Krishna is summarizing all the components of the material universe. The 25 components of the material universe, he actually summarizes that in chapter 13. So he gives a clue, he gives some brief introduction to the material world. And if you look at chapter 7, 4th verse, he talks about Bhumir, Apaha, anilaha, vayuhu, kham, mano, buddhir, evacha. Ahankara iti iyam me binna prakritihi ashtada. So here he talks about 8 components, and in 13.6 he talks about 25 components. So this is to give us a initial information about what are all the various components of the material world, about the material universe. And in the first 2.5 verses of chapter 15, he's going to deal with this in some detail. Yeah. And just to remind you, when we did initially the lectures on creation, all these things we have covered in those lectures about creation. So this should basically kind of revision for all. Now, why is that material world important? Because Krishna labeled this as kshetra. Yeah, he labeled this as kshetra. Kshetra is the material universe. Kshetrajna, Kshetrajna knows the material universe. There is only one being who knows everything about the material universe in all its infinite dimensions and aspects, and that is the Supreme Brahman himself. So Kshetra and Kshetrajna. So the Kshetra that is taken up as the first topic for discussion in chapter 15. So
Madhu,
that
you are
Kshetra is Brahmanda. But the
Madhu,
same, yeah,
your volume
yes,
is a bit low. I don't know whether it is only us or others are also feeling like that. Your volume of speech.
I don't know. What is the feedback from others? Can you guys hear all right?
Yeah, Madhu, we can
Yes.
hear.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Madhu,
we can hear
fine.
Madhu.
Okay, that's
Okay.
fine. Maybe yes then. No problem. No worries.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So that's Brahmanda. So the Brahmanda is called Kshetra. So the Pindanda. So every time you talk about Brahmanda, you have to talk about Pindanda. Pindanda is also the material world, which is the material world for the jivas. We are confined in this material body. So that is our Pindanda. So for that Pindanda, he is actually talking about the 7 modifications of Pindanda in the very next verse, chapter 13, 7th verse. Icha dveshaha sukam dukkam sangata chetana drutihi etat kshetram samasena savikaram udahrutam. So that is another 2 verses. So to understand chapter 15, the first 2.5, you need to have a background information of verse 13.6, verse 13.7, and chapter 7.4. Yeah. So you need to have this background. So you need to have this background information, then you can appreciate what is it that Krishna is telling in chapter 15, where he has listed the 25 tattvas first. So we have dealt with this before, and I'll just go through it quickly. So you have the Mula Prakriti and its 3 modifications, Sattva, Rajas, Tamas, and the very first modification is Mahat Tattva. Then you have Ahankara Tattva, which divides into 3, Vaikarika, Tejasa, Tamasa. The Tamasa Ahankara becomes Pancha Tanmatras, which then becomes Panchabhutas. Tejasa Ahankara becomes Indriyas, which become 5 Karma Indriyas, 5 Jnana Indriyas. Then you have Manas and Buddhi. And I've numbered them for you for your convenience. And from the 5 Bhutas all the way to Mula Prakriti, you have 25 components that form the Brahmanda.
What?
Shishrut, do you mind pausing your audio, please? There is an echo coming through. So that is the 25 components of the Brahmanda. Okay, moving on to the next slide. So once you have that background, now we are doing Pravesha to the first verse. So this hopefully would give you a bird's eye view, and then you're focusing in. We initially said about Jayam, we talk about 18, and then we said why 18 is important. Then we came to the 15th chapter. Then we said what is the background to the 15th chapter, 13th and 7th chapter should lead on to it. So once we have understood this, now we should come to the very first verse. So what is the very first verse? Urdhva Moolam, Adahashakam, Ashwattam, Prahuravyayam, Chandamsi, Yasya Paranani, Yastam Veda, Savedavit. So this verse is for Prakriti. It is talking about the Prakriti component of all of existence. So I've separated the words, I've broken them for our convenience. Urdhva Moolam is one word. Well, that has to be split into 2. Urdhvaha and Moolam. Then you have Adaha, Shakam. Then you have Ashwattam. Then you have Avyayam. Yasya, Chandamsi Paranani, Prahuhu, Tam, Yaha Veda, Saha Vedavid. So you split it open, because that is how you need to get the philosophy of the Gita, is to split it open. So what I want to do is, before I go to the first line, we need to take that box, the Ashwattham, yeah, that box that I put in red, the concept of Jagat tree in the Vedas. This is really interesting. So what is it talking about? The Jagat Vriksha. Yeah, Jagat Vriksha, Ashwattham, as you all know, is a tree. So in many areas, many places in the Vedas and in many Upanishads, this concept of Jagat Vriksha comes again and again. Now, take Katha Upanishad 231. So there is a very, very important verse in Katha Upanishad, and I'm going to come to it a bit later. But that verse is exactly the same as the 15th chapter, first verse of Gita. Urdhva Mulo Arvakshakaha Yesho Ashwattaha Sanatanaha. Exactly the same. Urdhva Mulaha Adaha Shakaha Ashwattam Prahur Avyayam in Gita. Katha Upanishad is saying Urdhva Mulaha Arvak Shakaha Yesho Ashwattaha Sanatanaha. So it comes in Katha Upanishad. And then you have another verse in Narayana Shruti. Prutak Moolam Haritasya Jagat Vrukshasya Bhumivat. So in Narayana Shruti, Jagat Vrukshasya. But Mundaka Upanishad, it talks about Dva Suparna Sayuja Sakaya Samanam Vruksham Parishashvajate. Vruksham, the tree. Yeah. So I have given you 3 examples of why Jagat Vriksha is taken up as a key metaphor. It is very symbolic in Vedic philosophy of a tree, a universe or material universe. Why is it so? Now, what is Ashwattha? So Ashwattha tree is a holy fig tree. So it is also called Ficus religiosa. It is not a banyan tree. I just need to correct you on that. It is not the banyan tree. It is the holy fig tree, and its botanical name is Ficus. Go to the temples of India, you will see Ashwattha tree in most temples. You will have Ashwattha tree, and under the Ashwattha tree, there may be lots of things that may be going on. So what I want to do is tell you that there is actually in that Ashwattha tree. So that is the first point. So just hold on to that idea. Now we are going to revise ourselves, and I want to remind you of this concept. When we were doing Brahmasutra, and when we were doing that particular sutra called Tattu Samanvayat, and I think Ajit did a very good summary of that as well, what Samanvaya is. And I told you there are 5 different rules of understanding Shastras. So when Vedavyasa, who's a composer of Brahmasutra, says Tattu Samanvayat, it means not just for the Vedas. It actually means for all of the scriptures, including Bhagavad Gita, which is also composed by Vedavyasa. Let's not forget that. Vedavyasa composed Bhagavad Gita. Basically, the conversation that happened between Krishna and Arjuna was documented by Vedavyasa. Okay, so that is the fact of the matter. So the rules that are devised in Brahma Sutra has to be applied to any verse that you look at in Bhagavad Gita. So when we looked at words, we spoke about something called Rudi, Yoga, and Yoga Rudi. And I told about river, I told you about Pankaja, and I told you about how means that Padmanabha Yoga word, for example, Padma and Nabha, you separate it out. So when you read a word, you separate it out to get the meaning. That is called yoga. But when you look at it in its entirety, that is called Rudi. Then we looked about Lakshanas, metaphors. Then we discussed about Tatparya Lingas, Purva Mimamsa Sutras, Upajivya, Upajivaka, Pramanya, Prabalya, and all that 5 rules of interpretations of Shastra that needs to be applied to every scripture, including Bhagavad Gita. And if we don't do it, unfortunately, we are going to lose out on all the philosophies and knowledge that has been compressed in each verse of the Gitas. Prakarana becomes very important. The contextual relevance as well becomes important, and yoga becomes important, and lakshana becomes important when we are interpreting chapter 15, and that is the reason why I wanted to remind you about these concepts. So moving on to the next slide. So now we go to the verse proper. Okay, so urdhva moolam adha shakam ashwattam prahuravyayam. So we said, so far this jagat vriksha, this material universe, this material existence, Vyasa, so Krishna is saying, this material universe has urdhva moolam and adaha shakam. So what does that mean? Urdhva moolam means urdhva has various meanings. One meaning is above, yeah, and moolam means roots. So when you look at it that way, it becomes, for this jagat vriksha, for this universe, its root is above and its branches are below. Okay, now, so I have put a tree there and I've told you what is shakam there and what is moolam here. So you have shakam and moolam. So branches and roots. Now, what is the most important component of the tree? So we need to look at it that way. So why is Vedavyasa giving this very cryptic clue about why this tree is an inverted tree? Okay, we need to address this. So there are various levels of understanding this. The first level of understanding is, as I said before, this is a metaphor. This is symbolic to give you an idea. What is that idea? The most important of a tree is its root. The roots are of various types, primary roots and secondary roots. Look at the knowledge of botany in our philosophers. They say trees have primary roots and secondary roots. The root supports the tree. The root holds the tree. The root sustains the tree. The rest of the tree is dependent on the root. Without the root, there is no tree. So these 7 points that I've listed are the qualities of a root. So Vedavyasa is telling us there is such a thing that is a root for this material universe, which is doing all the 7 things that I've listed below. Okay, so it is to give you that idea. He introduces the Ashwatha, the tree analogy of Jagat Vriksha. Now, the next one, Urdhva means high. High means what? Highest. Urdhvaha means the highest root, the primary root. So without the roots, there is no Jagat Vriksha. So for this Jagat Vriksha, who is the primary root? Vishnu is the primary root. Who are the secondary roots? Chit and Jada Prakriti. Jada Prakriti is the Mula Prakriti is called Jada Prakriti. That is the primordial matter is the secondary root for the appearance of this universe. Who is the Abhimani of the Jada Prakriti? It is Chit Prakriti. Who is Chit Prakriti? That is Lakshmi. So the philosophy there is of giving this roots analogy is the primary root is Vishnu. The secondary roots are Chit and Jada Prakriti. Okay. Adaha Shakam, what are the other chaps that are coming through? What is the main trunk and branches? We'll come to that next. But I want to give you this idea. So why he gives an inverted tree is to give you an idea that is the high above, that Vishnu, who is the highest, who is there, he is the primary root for this tree. And what does that Vishnu do? He uses Jada Prakriti. Through Chetana Prakriti, he starts the universe into motion. And we have done this before. Janmadhyasya yataha. When Sutrakara says Janmadhyasya yataha, what did Vishnu do? He said Om Atataha, and the primordial matter then goes into vibration and the universe comes into being. Yeah. So it is to give you that idea. He puts Urdhva Moolam and Adaha Shakam. So that is another level of meaning for that one word, Urdhva Moolam and Adaha Shakam. Now, but why roots upside down compared to a normal tree? You might ask. You might have just put the normal tree and said this universe is like the normal tree. No. So the clue there is, what does Urdhva actually mean? Unnatohi Urdhvaha Uchyate. Urdhvaha and Unnataha are synonyms. Unnataha means Sarvotama, the highest. Urdhva means the highest. Urdhvaha Uttamaha Sarvataha. So those are the Sanskrit words for that. Urdhvaha is also called Uttamaha, of what? Sarvataha, compared to everything, this one is the highest. Who is this thing who is the highest? It is the Vishnu. Look at Purusha Shukta. What does it say? Tripad Urdhva Udait Purushaha. Okay, Urdhva Udait. He is highest and he is beyond the Tripad. He is beyond the three material planes and is highest. Yeah. So when you read verses in the Gita, don't look at it in isolation. You need to cross-reference various works and understand why is Veda Vyasa has given you that word Urdhvaha there. So Urdhvaha, Uttamaha, Sarvataha. And who is the Urdhvaha, Uttamaha, is Vishnu. So to bring home that message, he gives you Urdhva Moolam. Yeah. Adaha Shakam are the other chappies who come down. Okay. Now, so that is the second level of interpretation for Urdhva Moolam, Adaha Shakam. So we move on. So who is this Urdhvaha? You have to establish who this Urdhvaha is. Urdhvaha Vishnuhu. What is the evidence for that? Why is Vishnu also called Urdhvaha? So to go for that, you have to go to Vedas. You have to go to Taittiriya Aranyaka, where there is a very important verse called Urdhva Pavitro Vaji Nivasu Amrutam Asmi Dravinam Savarchasam. Very beautiful verse. It's very similar to Gayatri. Urdhva Pavitro. Who is this Urdhva? He is the most sacred. What does he do? He is inside the sun. And what does he do? He gives moksha to us. That is exactly what Gayatri Mantra is about the Surya Narayana. So this Taittiriya Aranyaka talks about the same thing. Look at Vishwakarma Shukta of Rigveda. Ajasya Nabo Avadyekam Arpitam Asmin Vishwani Bhuvanani Tastuhu. The unborn is the reason for all the universe to come about. Mundaka Upanishad, we have done it before. Yata Urna Nabihi Srujate Gruhnate cha. This whole universe comes out like how a spider puts out its web and it comes back. Look at Ambrini Shukta of Rigveda. I've just underlined that because we've done this before. Yam kamaye tam tamugram krunomi tam brahmanam tam rishim tam sumedam. Aham suve pitaramasya murdan mamayonihi apsvantaha samudre. So Lakshmi is saying, you know what, I create everybody, starting from Chaturmukha to Rudra to Indra to Varuna to every damn thing I create. But my creator is Narayana. Okay, so that is why he is called Urdhvaha Vishnuhu. And what is that Urdhvaha Vishnuhu does? Chaturmukha comes. Chaturmukha is the trunk. And that Chaturmukha then creates, he's sitting on that 14 petal lotus. And what is that 14 petal lotus? The 14 levels of material creation. Okay, so when Veda Vyasa says Urdhva Moolaha Adaha Shakaha, we should remind ourselves of all the philosophies that we have learned from Vedas and Upanishads that actually celebrate this Urdhva Vishnuhu. Urdhva Vishnuhu. Yeah. Now, fourth level of interpretation of Urdhva Moola. So now what I have done for our benefits is I have listed all the Chetanas, all the material components of the universe. So we spoke about Moola Prakriti, who's Lakshmi. Then Sattva Rajas Tamas is Shri Bhu and Durga. Mahat Chaturmukha's body is Mahat Tattva. Rudra's body is Ahankara Tattva. And then he divides and all the other Chetanas that all become Abhimanis. They look after those components of the universe. And I have listed all the Devatas here. And we have done that section on the deities and how it is so important in Vedic pantheon and philosophy. So all these Vedic deities of the Vedic pantheon, starting from Chaturmukha Brahma, become the trunk of this tree and various branches of this tree. Yeah. So see how our Veda Vyasa is taking us through this journey, starting from Vishnu to Lakshmi, and then he brings us to Mahat Tattva. So all these fellows from Mahat Tattva are the Adaha Shakam. Whereas the primary root is Vishnu, the secondary root is Lakshmi, and the Jada Prakriti. Okay, those are the four levels of looking at. Okay, so as I said before, Unnato hi urdhvaha uchyate, urdhvaha uttamaha sarvataha, urdhvaha Vishnuhu. Look at this Kataka Upanishad. You cannot escape from this. It is identical. It is the same as 15.1. Urdhva mulo arvakshako yesho ashwattaha sanatanaha. So basically what is saying, this fellow who is the origin of the universe is Urdhva Mulaha. And then it goes on in the very next line, celebrating who this Urdhva is. Tadeva Shukram, Tad Brahma, Tadeva Amrutam Uchyate, Tasmin Lokaha Shritaha Sarve, Tad Na Anyeti Kaschana, Yetad Vaitat. Yama is telling this to Nachiketa. He says that Urdhva is Shukram. Shukram means what? He is full of. And Tadeva Brahma, he is Brahma. We have sung this Bruhanto hi Hasmin, full of gunas. Tadeva Amrutam, he is always immortal. So it goes on and celebrates who this Urdhva is in Yama in Kataka Upanishad. So that again gives you a clinching argument. The Urdhva there is not a literal meaning of saying the roots are above. Absolutely not. When you do classical studies of Vedas and Upanishads, that Urdhva is Vishnu, who is the origin of the universe. Okay, so moving on to the next slide. So next, what happens? What did it say? Urdhva Moolam Adaha Shakam Ashwattam. So I wanted to give you an information of Ashwatha, and for that I initially gave you in Vedic philosophy, it is about Jagat Vriksha. This tree, Jagat tree, is the material universe. And Veda Vyasa then gives, he could have named any tree. He could have said mango tree, he could have said neem tree, he could have said some tree, but he chose to use only Ashwatha tree. Why? We need to ask that question, because then that gives you higher levels of philosophy and knowledge. When you ask that question, why did Veda Vyasa or why did Krishna say Ashwatha? He could have said something else. Why did he say Ashwatha? There are 10 different reasons that I've listed for your convenience as to why Ashwatha is there. The symbolism and philosophy of Ashwatha is just mind-boggling, literally, and I'll take you through that over the next few minutes. The very first one, in Vibhuti Yoga, he talks about Ashwataha Sarva Bhutanam, Sarva Vrikshanam, he says. Yeah? Among all Vrikshas, I am Ashwataha. Okay? He has already said that. So he is bringing the same Ashwataha in the 15th chapter. Why? Because Ashwatha tree is a very holy tree, as it's called the holy fig tree. Let's not forget, it's a holy tree. Every temple in India, you have various deities, and people will go around the Ashwatha tree on a fairly regular basis. There is a physiological reason for this. Number one, it apparently has highest levels of oxygen. It's particularly, I believe, good for pregnant women who go around the Ashwatha tree. So that is one, some biological explanation, if you like. The other one is Ashwatha tree is believed to have Sannidhana of various deities. Various devatas and deities are there in the Ashwatha tree and makes it very holy. And that is a belief of the Hindus, and they go around the Ashwatha tree. So that is the second reason that I have said. The third reason, you will be surprised to know that the Ashwatha tree does not make fruits that are edible. Okay, the only use of Ashwatha tree is the sticks of the Ashwatha tree is used for samidhi, is used as stick for yajna. Of Vedic sacrifice, it's used for sticks. Okay. Now the fourth point about Ashwatha is the leaves of the Ashwatha tree. Yeah, they are constantly moving. This is very interesting. I'll come to that idea later. If you go look at the Ashwatha tree in Indian villages, there will be no breeze, but you will still see that leaves constantly moving. So in this side, I've said Rudi Artha. Rudi means when you take Ashwatha as a whole, what are the philosophical concepts that I can actually get? No, what will happen if I use yoga of actually splitting Ashwatha and then understand why Veda Vyasa has put that word there? Not just to denote that Ashwatha is a holy tree. Actually, there is a deeper philosophy there, and I'm going to come to that now. So the point number 5, Ashwatha needs to be split. Ashwatha. Shwaha means tomorrow. Taha means remaining. Means opposite, not remaining tomorrow. So what does that mean is, the meaning there is the material universe is constantly changing. This universe is a dynamic universe. It is constantly changing. What is today is not the same as tomorrow. Certainly after 100 years of Chaturmukha Brahma's life, there is going to be a pralaya. So constantly the universe is on the move. So by using Ashwatha, The Yogika word, Veda Vyasa, wants us to understand that this material universe is constantly changing. Okay, and that is the reason why, if you look at Ashwa and Ta, Ashwa means what? Horse. Ta means remaining. If you look at a horse never stays still in a place. Either it is twitching its skin, or it's wagging its tail, or it is breathing heavily, or it is constantly, or it is running around. It is constantly moving. So again, the Vedic rishis, when they take Ashwamedha or Ashwa, they are not thinking about a horse sacrifice. They're thinking about bigger things about the universe, the dynamic universe. Yeah, Ashwa. Look at the word Ashwa. You have to open Ashwa. It is called Ashu and Va. That literally means that which moves fast. Okay, that which is constantly moving and restless. So that Ashwata gives you the ideas about the universe. Okay. Now, besides, so in the Vedic times, horse was the most common, vehicle, and it used to move fast. You could say in the modern times, it could be a jet, it could be in a supersonic jet, whatever. But if you look at what are the things that move fast, apart from these, wind moves fast, mind moves fast. But who is the one that moves the fastest? Vishnu moves the fastest. Look at Taittiriya Upanishad. We've done this verse. Yato vacho nivartante aprapya manasasaha, which means what? Even the mind cannot catch him. Mind itself is very fast, but such a mind itself cannot catch that Vishnu, because the Vishnu is the fastest. Yeah. So that gives you an idea. In the Vedic rishis, when they thought about Ashwa, you are looking at Hayagriva. Who is Hayagriva? Hayagriva is Vishnu's incarnation in the form of a horse. Not that he literally had a horse head, but it is to give you that idea, that symbolism, that here is a guy whose knowledge moves very fast. Ashu, Va means jnana. So Ashwa means he whose knowledge moves very fast. That is Sarvagnya, is Hayagriva. Okay, now Ashwa Tata. Ashwatta means Tata. Tata means what? Parvation. So this Ashwa is the universe, and this Vishnu pervades this universe. So he is also called Ashwatta. Ashwa is Vishnu. Tam means food. This universe is his food. At the end of the universe, 100 years of Chaturmukha's life is done. This universe becomes his food, and he eats it. Okay, so Ashwata has so many meanings. In the Rudi form, there is a meaning. When you split open, it gives you primarily the meaning of a dynamic universe which is constantly changing. And in that dynamic universe, who makes this universe dynamic? It is this Ashwata, who is Hayagriva, who is sitting inside the universe, who makes the universe very, very dynamic. The reason why this becomes important is, let's remind ourselves, that is what Prakarana of Gita becomes important. This is a chapter about Purushottama Yoga. We need to know why this Purusha is the highest. So now we know that this Purusha, who is also called Ashwata, is the highest because he controls this dynamic universe. So that is the beauty of the word Ashwata as it appears in the first line of chapter 15. Look at the 10th one. We'll deal with it in the next week. And we would have all seen this image of Krishna on an Ashwata leaf and on water. So there is water, there is Ashwata leaf, and on top of that is Krishna. Why? That is symbolic. Yeah, so the Ashwata, Prahuravyayam, Chandamsi, Yasya Paranani. We'll come to that next week. That Paranani, the leaves, Ashwata, and he says it's the Vedas. And the water there is the Mula Prakriti. So this is a situation before Pralaya, before Srishti. In Pralaya, this fellow Ekameva Advitiyam alone is there, and the Namatmaka Prapancha, which is the Vedas, and the Rupatmaka Prapancha, which is Mula Prakriti, or under him, under his. That is the symbolism of the example, and we'll come to that next. So Ashwata has got several meanings. So I hope you're able to grasp some of it, but think about it and contemplate it, because please, my humble request is never read Gita in a very mundane sense, because there are deeper levels of philosophies, and you will get these philosophies only if you go to the works of our acharyas like Shankara, Ramanuja, and Madhva and others. You will get the beauty of this. So don't miss out on that. Do your research and understand what the acharyas, the core acharyas are saying, because there is lots more information packed in this word Ashwatha. So now is interesting. So the next, what has happened is, Veda, Krishna has said, Urdhva Moolam, Adaha Shakam, Ashwattham. Then he said, Prahuhu, the wise say that this Jagat Vriksha is Avyayam. Avyayam means indestructible. So this becomes self-contradictory. If you look at Ashwathaha and you look at Avyayam. So in the one point he's saying this is a constantly changing universe. And the very next word he said, but this is indestructible. How is that possible? How can you have a constantly changing universe, but it is indestructible? Okay. And that is the beauty of that. So Veda Vyasa is asking you to think as to how does that fit in? How can something be constantly changing, but it cannot be destroyed? How can it be indestructible? So to understand that, go to Rig Veda, 10th mandala, 109 Suktam, third verse. It is a very popular verse. Surya Chandramaso Data Yata Purvam Akayat. Bhagavatam says, Yad etad idanim tad agre cha paschad api etad idrusham. Vyasasmriti Vishwam Satyam Vasho Vishnoho Nityameva Pravahataha. So what that means is beautiful. Look at Rig Veda's verse. I'm astounded by the physics, the physics of this, the cosmology of this. Data yata purvam akalpayat. Data means the supreme creator, the supreme being. Yata purvam. How the universe was there before, yeah, akalpayat. Similarly, he creates the next universe. So what the idea of saying avyayam, although this universe is changing, but it is indestructible, means that cycle, the eternal cycle of creation and destruction and maintenance, creation, destruction and maintenance, there is no end to it. So this is called pravahato anaditvam. This is like a river. I've given you a picture of river Ganges flowing through the Himalayas. The river is constantly flowing. The water molecules are moving all the time, but the river as such is always there. So that is the flow of the cosmos. The flow of the cosmos is what Veda Vyasa is saying, Ashwataha Prahur Avyayam. Yeah? So that is constantly moving. So Purva Brahma Kale Yata Stitihi Tata Sarvatrapi Iti Avyayata. So that is the meaning of Avyayam there. Now, I want to pause here for a minute and then get you all woken up. So I want to introduce this concept called conformal cycle cosmology. This is a new concept in cosmology that's come. And I'm going to ask you a question. Who is Professor Roger Penrose? Who is going to answer that question? Apart from the fact that he's from University of Oxford, who is Roger Penrose?
Did he get any Nobel Prize or something recently?
Well done, Sudarshan. So he got the prize this year. Okay, 2020 Nobel Prize for Physics goes to Professor Roger Penrose, who discovered the black hole, who described the black hole. Okay, now on the right, there is a paper that's just come out in March 2020 talking about what is called conformal cyclic cosmology. So what that means is, I'm not a physicist, but I again find it extremely interesting. So what this same chap who has now got this year's Nobel Prize is, now he has come up with this view with some observations in the universe. So there are certain areas in the universe that have not been accounted for with this Big Bang. And he's saying these are the remnants of the previous Big Bang. So the current view, the view how the things are changing is, the Big Bang was not the beginning of the universe, but merely a single stage in an eternal cycle of creation and recreation, is now the view of at least this famous physicist. Gita first verse, and it says Ashwataha Prahur Avyayam. And our Vedas has already said Data Yata Purvam Akalpayat. Our Bhagavatam has already said that And we have described this universe as pravahato anaditvam. So this concept of eternal cycles is actually making its headway into mainstream physics. I don't know if you read the Bhagavad Gita. Most physicists, including Albert Einstein, they tend to read the Bhagavad Gita to get their inspiration. So it is likely that he has nicked this idea from Gita, but that is just from a very jovial point of view. But it is likely. Yeah. So that is the beauty of Bhagavad Gita chapter 15, the first verse. Urdhva moolam adaha shakam ashvattam prahuhu avyayam. Okay. So now I'm going to ask a bigger question. So how does this Jagat Vriksha establish the Uttamatva of Purusha? Because that is what this chapter has started off with. Yeah, we should never forget that. We should not put unnecessary commentaries and comments into that. We should always stick to what is the purpose of chapter 15. The purpose of the chapter 15 is to show us mundane beings what is the Uttamatva of Purusha. So Veda Vyasa, second sutra, he has already said Janmadhyasya Yataha, and we spent 2 or 3 weeks talking about that. And if you go to the fourth Adhyaya, he said Jagat Vyaparavarjam. This creatorship of the universe belongs only to Brahman. It belongs only to Vishnu and nobody else. That is called Jagat Vyaparavarjam. Yeah. And I come to this Acharya's verses. Bahuchitra Jagat Bahuda Karanat Parashaktihi Ananta Gunaha Paramaha. So when you look at the creation of the universe and this dynamic universe and these eternal cycles and the variegateness of the universe and everything is different from another thing, you should always appreciate the greatness of the Supreme who is behind this universe driving it in such a way. And why is that greatness? Swatantram, paratantram cha dvividam tattvam ishyate, swatantro Bhagavan Vishnu. Because that Vishnu is the highest. He is the most independent being and the highest being. He is the one that makes this universe and gives it the dynamic reality. So for us to grasp those ideas, Vedavyasa, in that one line, Urdhva Moolam Adahashakam Ashwattam Prahuravyayam, he has given us so much for us to read about. And even our physicists are beginning to scratch the surface with that. And again, I come back to this. When you talk about the creatorship, Urdhva Moolam, this universe is Urdhva Moolam means what? If Vishnu is the creator, if he is the Janmadhyasya Yataha, then Jayatirtha's point again becomes important. Janmadhyasya Yataha iti Bhagavata Sutrakarena Jagat Udayadi Nimittakaram Parasya Brahmano Lakshanam Abhihitam. Which means if this Urdhva, Vishnu who has created this universe has to be real. Okay, let us not forget that this very universe is not an illusion. This universe is a very holy place because it is a creation of the Supreme Being. And it is in this universe we are in samsara. So in that sense, this Jagat Vriksha is also a samsara. So here is the conundrum. Only if there is a real disease, then there is a question of its eradication. So unless this samsara is real, that the suffering is real, then there is a question of removing a real disease. Has any patient, has any doctor, or let's say, is any doctor able to cure a disease that does not exist? The whole purpose of a physician is that somebody has a real disease and this physician cures the disease. If there is no disease to start with, there is no question of eradicating that disease. So I want to leave at that, because next week we'll deal about how this links up with samsara and how understanding this material universe should lead us to understand the nature of the samsara, and that should then lead us, because we are dealing with Purushottama Yoga, that should then lead to understanding the greatness of the Supreme, that jnana. Remember as how Mukund ji was talking, yatartha jnana, the true knowledge will then lead on to bhakti. And that is what is the solution for our disease called samsara, which is real and which needs to be eradicated. So I will stop at that. I might have gone a bit longer, but this very first line is such a beautiful line in chapter 15 that I wanted to deal with it in various dimensions aspects of it. And we'll go to the second line next week and talk about Chandamsi Yasya Paranani, Yastam Veda Saveda Vid. So Chandamsi Yasya Paranani, why did Veda Vyasa call these leaves as Vedas of this tree? So that is a very interesting philosophical concept. I will take it up next week. So I'll stop there. Krishna Pranamastu, and thank you for listening. Any questions?
Any questions?
So maybe if there are no questions, then maybe they're shell-shocked, or maybe they've gone to sleep.
No,
Two
Madhu.
possibilities.
We are awake. We are awake. I will try and memorize it, Mother. I'll try to chant 10 slokas of Bhagavad Gita every day. But from tomorrow, my target is to memorize before you finish. Before you finish this session, I'll try and memorize the Purushottama Yoga. Let's try and see. I'll try.
So Chitra, well, that's wonderful. So now you volunteered yourself for next week to recite those verses. Okay, so no getting away from it then.
I can definitely recite it, but definitely not, like not even a single word I understand from it, but I learn it now from you, Madhu. Thank you so much. I'll try to learn. I try to, like sort of grasp the full thing of it, but I'm trying still.
Yeah, great. Yeah.
Thanks,
Excellent.
Madhu. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
Anybody
you,
else?
Madhu. I'll also learn by it. I have memorized long ago, but now I've realized I can't do that like what I did before. Because my grandson learned before me because we are both doing it together. He learned the five verses. So I was asking. I thought I'll ask him to chant today, but his mother said no. So this class is a bit high for him. So
Yeah, that's good. Okay, wonderful. Yeah, very nice to hear that. Yeah. Anybody else? Excellent. All right. So shall we meet up next week then? Anything else you want to announce, Sudarshan?
Nothing, but I think people need to note the time changes to 4 o'clock, and because it's a winter time here in the UK, and so for other people to join in as well.
But there is a less number of participation. Is it because of the time change?
I don't know. The less number of participants today, whether due to the time change, we don't know. But yeah, I think do come next week, and we'll continue our journey. Thank you, Madhu. If there's not any questions, we'll...
Madhu, can we have the slides for today, please?
Yeah. Sure. I'll send it as a PDF. I forgot to post it. Yeah, I'll do it. Yeah, no problem.
Okay, thanks, Madhu. We'll give a big hand to Madhu.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madhu.
Thank you.
thank you, Madhu.
Okay, bye.
ചായ കുടിക്കാതെ